This administration will not tolerate actions by any nation that seeks to illegally sabotage American companies.
The United States has charged 5 Chinese military officers with what it calls commercial cyber espionage.
The decision by the US Department of Justice to indict 5 Chinese officers for hacking is a really very significant move. This is certainly an issue that has been worrying the US for a long period of time. And last summer, when President Obama had his first summit meeting with President Xi Jinping of China, the issue of intellectual property theft by the Chinese was the major issue. It's one which is really worrying the US government because they believe that China is carrying out an enormous amount of intellectual property theft from US companies, and something's got to be done about it.
When a foreign nation uses military or intelligence resources and tools against an American executive or corporation to obtain trade secrets or sensitive business information for the benefit of its state-owned companies, we must say enough is enough.
While the move is significant, it's mainly a symbolic gesture. The US is taking a tougher stance on China over hacking as it tries to build support in the corporate world and in the international community.
This is not a case that has any real chance of ever reaching court, but it's more a sort of diplomatic, political tactic, a way of trying to increase the pressure on China as an element of name and shame in these US tactics, and just a general way of trying to raise the issue again and slowly increase, well, US hope is some kind of leverage on China to get it to change what it's doing. They say it's a sort of clear breach of free market principles. They think this is well beyond conventional espionage, and that's the argument they're having. One of the big problems for the US is that, in particular, the Edward Snowden revelations have left it open to potential charges of hypocrisy.
The revelations from Edward Snowden, the former NSA intelligence contractor, have shown that the US has been spying on lots of people around the world, politicians, countries, but also companies. I mean, energy companies in Brazil, Huawei, the telecoms company in China. So you could argue that the US says it doesn't give commercial information obtained from this spying to American companies, but it looks pretty clear that they use some of this information to help US commerce in general, which obviously helps US companies at the end of the day. So I think there's some basis to what China is saying here.
The big question is whether this move will have the effect America hopes. Will the naming and shaming of these 5 officers result in China retreating from alleged cyber hacking? Or could it simply lead to a worsening relationship between 2 global superpowers?
China's not going to change anything, I don't think. Both countries have known for a long time what each other is doing. What's different is sometimes the Americans decide to publicize it, and in this case they've indicted or charged 5 Chinese military officers with a crime. But I don't think China is going to do anything differently. In fact, the end result is probably going to be the relations between the 2 countries suffer.
It is possible that China would publicly announce measures against American companies or even against American officials. If they really wanted to cause a big fuss, they could use the Snowden documents to issue their own indictment against senior American officials at the National Security Agency. Alternatively, another thing they could do is more subtly just put a lot of pressure on American companies, not ever announcing anything, but just a whole series of different administrative problems they could create for American companies. That would be a more subtle way of pushing back against the US on this front.
The Chinese want their economy to grow. They need to maintain a very strong economic growth rate. And in order to do that, the argument, allegedly, is that they need to steal lots of intellectual property from the West in order to maintain some kind of technological edge. It's really unclear how this will develop. The one thing which I think one can say is that this issue of Chinese intellectual property theft is at the center of the bilateral relationship. It is, in many ways, the issue that most bothers the US. And so it doesn't feel to me that they're likely to give up on this anytime soon.
A year has gone by since the Snowden revelations, and they're no longer the daily news event they once were. Because of that, the US felt the time was right to try to put pressure on China over commercial cyber espionage. It isn't yet clear whether this tactic will work in the way Washington hopes. Daniel Garahan, Financial Times.